So there are people, like my parents and other people that I was raised with would like to take credit when I'm being nice. Seth talks about, oh, he cares about humanity, he's such a good... It just baffles the hell out of them that I can somehow both be working for Satan and still be pretty nice. So they give all the credit for the nice parts to God, and I'm like, no, I'm a better person now than I was then. So I don't have to have all of that baggage. There's actually a title for tonight's talk, and normally I don't bother titling talks. I write almost a new one for almost every event, but this is, I did parts of this last week in Kentucky at the Kentucky Free Thought Convention. I called it, Hyperbole Will Destroy the World. And I have to begin by pointing out for English majors, word nerds, and other people like me who might be drawn to being overly pedantic about things, yes, I know hyperbole is a great literary device. I mean that it tends to lose its effectiveness when we're using it in conversations and debates, because if you say something like, oh, this weighs a ton, the implication is that everybody knows that it doesn't actually weigh a ton, which is why it lends a little gravitas to what you're saying. But if you say, I've witnessed a miracle, oh, wait a minute, how do you define miracle? What is it that you're talking about? Because I'd like to think that that's hyperbole and I can just shrug it off, but you might actually mean that you witnessed something that is supernatural coming in to save us all, and I don't buy that. So it gets confusing because we're not necessarily clear. So I understand that most of what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do really with hyperbole. I'm talking about exaggerations, but the title was just too good not to use it, because reactionary, exaggerative creation of caricatures will negatively impact conversations and efforts to improve the world by creating barriers and unnecessary divisions which inhibit productive conversations. Just doesn't sound as good as hyperbole will destroy the world. A lot of it comes down to something we're all guilty of. We're right. I was right before when I was wrong. I know I'm right, and I know you're wrong. I've already done the hard work of knowing that I'm right and knowing you're wrong, and it's far more important for me to show you or say that I'm right and you're wrong than it is for me to show that I'm right and you're wrong. These types of exaggerations come up all the time in all sorts of areas that plague our communities, and by that I'm talking about the atheist community, the skeptic community, the freethinker community, whatever freaking label you want to put on it. It comes up in every conversation. There are many times where it's not even hyperbole, it's just kind of overstating the case. It's you're really confident, and so you're going to take that extra step. You've been having this reasoned conversation, you've spoken to believers over and over again, you know where they're going, you know where you want to get, you got to hurry up, and then you may go just a bridge too far, and you may still be right. For example, one of the things I cautioned people about when I did a video talking about not overstating the case for fear that you might accidentally shift the burden of proof to something you can't meet, is this assertion that Jesus never existed. Maybe he didn't. I'm perfectly fine with that possibility. My friend Richard Carrier just wrote a 700-plus page tome covering this, trying to use Bayesian analysis to determine, and was it probable? I think Dr. Price is probably going to talk about it tomorrow, the existence of Jesus or the myth area of this, and that's great because I love the conversation as an intellectual pursuit. But if you're talking to my mom and trying to convince her that she's wrong, I don't care how good your scholarship is on Jesus mythicism, you don't know your audience. And you're adopting a burden of proof now that you're probably never going to be able to meet. We're already in a position where the bulk of historians tend to view this as a narrow little niche and a perversion, and they scoff and whatever. And what needs to happen is the work that some people are doing to demonstrate that this is the case. But I don't want to adopt that because I don't need to demonstrate that he was a myth in order to point out that this is still bullshit. I could grant that he existed and say, do we have a good record of his words and deeds? I don't see that we do. I don't know how you've determined that. And so I can't get behind it. I could grant that he existed and that we have a good record of his words, but perhaps not his deeds. And now all of a sudden, we just have to look at his words and say, yep, he said this. Do we have any reason to believe it's true? I could grant that maybe we even have some reasons to believe that he might have known what he was talking about, or this was an amalgamation of different people, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And he fed the multitudes with loaves and fishes. How did you determine that the reason he was able to do that was because he was God? How did you rule out, aliens? How did you rule out every other possible naturalistic explanation to determine that the supernatural explanation is the most likely when the whole foundations of science are based on methodological naturalism and the recognition that we seem to currently be blocked from confirming supernatural causation, and we're not even sure how somebody could demonstrate that it's possible? They're the ones who believe something, got the burden of proof. Why would I shift that by exaggerating my position? How many have heard former believers, this may primarily be a Southern Baptist thing? I know that I know that I know that I know that Jesus Christ is Lord and risen. Boy, if that's not exaggeration, you don't know that. You don't know that you know that. You know that you know that you think that you believe that this is what you're going to say. I will pick on someone who Sam Harris. Sorry. I mean, he and we are in an agreement and alignment on many things. Some other things we're not. That's the way it is, by the way. That's true for me and everybody. Me and Seth, me and Aaron, me and Sam, me and Richard, whoever. Pick somebody. I'll get more to disagreements in a bit, but Sam Harrison, Letter to Christian Nation, included this thing where the Bible says pi equals 3. No, it doesn't. It's a teeny little book. It's a teeny little letter. And if you're going to go after the Bible, why would you pick something so obviously spun out into, the land of interpretation and exaggeration? Why not pick something better? The Bible doesn't say pi equals 3. To even presume that these people had any concept that they were coming up with a mathematical constant or a mathematical description of the universe when they were describing a well that happened to be. These people were measuring from their elbows to their fingertips. Not all that accurate. Why not use something better? And yet apologists fell all over themselves trying to come up with defenses. And I saw pictures of wells that were like, the well would come up and then it had a broader border at the top so that you could get your 10 across measurement and your 30 around and you measured at the base. It's just nuts. None of that's going to convince anybody. But you're so right, that you're so convinced that you're right and they're wrong that you just go with it. Preachers are just in it for the money. Stop. Preachers in megachurches, maybe some could be. Joel Osteen, maybe. Most preachers have a second job. Some of them have a third job. This isn't some top-down institution where the next preacher is picked on high by a ruling class and let in on the secrets. This is a system where people like me who sat in the pew feel called and work their way up there. The church may, in fact, pay for their education, but they're doing it because they believe it. When I was a teenager, I thought I was supposed to be a preacher. I thought that's what God wanted. That's what my parents thought. That's what the other people in my youth group thought. I am, by the way, somewhat of a preacher. But not the way they expected. But I was terrified of public speaking, so I ran off, joined the Navy. Didn't want to do that. That's not me. No. There's some irony, afraid of public speaking. Turns out, by the way, the secret of public speaking is don't bullshit people. Tell them what you think. If you want to say, I don't know, these are my thoughts, you accept it, you don't, boom, done. Man, that shit's easy. But I didn't want to do that. I was terrified of public speaking. Everybody thought, but I wasn't in any way in it for the money. I mean, this was a calling. And every preacher I ever had wasn't in it for the money. Most of those guys didn't get rich. And by the way, it is guys, almost exclusively. I don't think I've ever seen a Southern Baptist woman as a preacher. They're usually in control of a lot of things behind the scenes, even though, because God's pretty much dead set against them actually being in charge of a man. So they're really way smarter than us, and they do it like the string pulling from, honey, I think we should, yep, whatever you say. My wife loves it. I was raised Southern Baptist. Religion is a scam. Well, a scam implies some intent to deceive. And people have asked me for years, aren't you mad that your parents raised you Southern Baptist? Aren't you mad at those preachers? They all lied to you. They were scamming you. No, they didn't. No, they weren't. Scam is an intent to deceive somebody. A lie is an intentional deceit. My parents taught me what they honestly believed was correct. They happened to be wrong so far as I can tell, but there was no malice and no intent to deceive, and the same is true for the preachers that I grew up with. I'm not mad at them. They are victims just as I was. They are guilty of nothing more than being human beings who don't think correctly. They were raised in an environment, they were taught these things, they accepted it, it made sense, it makes them feel good, and that's it. Does that mean there's not liars out there? No, tons of them. Don't know who they are. Because I can't read minds. No matter how much time I spend doing magic and mentalism on stage, different things, I actually can't read minds. Religion's a tool to control people. It can be used that way, but when you start saying it was intended to be that way, now you've adopted a burden of proof that you need to meet. We are generally good at being little quasi-mind readers. We read people's intentions all the time. Walking around the crowded airport, I don't have to exchange conversations with everybody who's moving around. I read their body language. I see which way they're going. You make eye contact with somebody, and there's an unspoken communication. Yeah, I am kind of going to the right, or I am going to cross here. And we just go. We do it. We do it all the time. We're so good at it. We don't even need to be able to see the person to their face because we do it in cars on the road. Our body language extends out to the cars. Is it any surprise that people might take that and say, wow, I think I'm a little bit psychic? You get this constant confirmation of your intuitions about picking up the phone and things like that. You build this stuff up, and it makes sense. But we can't actually read minds. If we could apply for the JREF $1 million prize. But we certainly act like we can read minds, and we do it all the time. And to me, it's been kind of frustrating. Does Ray Comfort really believe what he says? I don't know. I can't read minds. I'm willing to take his word for it. I've met a lot of people who say the same things that he does, that seem to believe. I know that I actually honestly believed those things when I was a believer. I would actually need some strong evidence that someone doesn't actually believe what they say. What about Joel Osteen? I don't know. I'm not even sure what it is that he says he believes. How the hell do you get a stadium? A former, I think it was NBA basketball stadium or something. We went to the church, Arn and Phil and I went there and toured it. It's amazing, and they're so proud. He doesn't take a dime of money. He doesn't get paid at all for his service to the church. Well, if I was making all that money off the books that they sell in the church, I wouldn't make you pay me a salary either. If I could afford to set aside this $3.5 million mansion while I move up to the $10 million mansion and wait for the property values to change before I sell this one off for $5 million, what do I need with a salary from your church? I should be paying you. I bet he's never thought that. Does Pat Robertson believe? Falwell? Peter Popoff. Surely he couldn't believe. I mean, we've caught him fraud. He's got his earpiece in. He's getting messages from his wife. She's saying all kinds of racist, crappy things, and it's clear that this is a fraud. And I agree. But I can't tell you what he actually believes. And one of the things about belief is that once you get convinced of something, you can get convinced of the peripheral things as well, and then you rationalize excuses for this. Like, oh, I believe God's actually healing people, but my wife's just telling me this stuff because God doesn't do it as often as we might like, and it's really important for me to convince people that God's doing it now so that they stay in the church, so that they keep contributing, so that the real miracles can happen. The way we rationalize things is amazing. Something that Seth pointed out kind of drives me a little nuts, but, well, I'll skip that for half a second here. This idea of reading minds is a conversation my wife and I have had a number of times, because she and some of her friends, when talking about the religious right when it comes to women's issues, would say things like, the religious right just want to control sex. The religious right just want to punish women for having sex. The religious right just want to punish women for trying to control their own bodies. The religious right want to make women slaves to their biology. Don't say any of those. By the way, when I say stuff like don't say any of those, I'm not up here as the you shall do what I say, in case that wasn't clear. I'm telling you why I think this is a bad idea. And it's because you're pretending to be a mind reader. You pretend to know what their intentions are. And not only are you doing that, but you're almost certainly wrong. When I was part of the religious right, I didn't want to make women slaves to their biology. I didn't want to control sex. I didn't want to punish women, not even loose women. I wanted to find loose women. I just couldn't tell anybody about it. Don't say what their intentions are unless you can demonstrate it. Instead, say that the religious right want to institute policies that have the effect of punishing women for their biology, making them slaves to their biology, and controlling sex, because that's what they're doing, and you haven't adopted a burden of proof with regard to their intentions. You say their policies do these things, and they don't care enough about it to stop. And now you've hammered them just as strongly as before, but without the added weakness of pretending that you can read minds. Religious people are stupid. My IQ didn't go up when I found my way out of religion. I just had better ways of looking at things. I had more access to more information. I had a better understanding of the world. In some contexts, some people may say, well, you're not as stupid as you were. Fine. Then let's be clear about the context. Because there are plenty of brilliant people who have believed and who do believe. We oversimplify. We talk about, oh, well, they're defending something that's stupid, so therefore they must be stupid. Being stupid, acting stupid, stupid on this issue, these are getting more specific there so that you're not summarizing the entirety of somebody's character. I'm now going to make fun of some stupid comments. In the debate that I did in the Church of Christ in San Antonio, there was a guy who got up and said that gravity is responsible for 78% of all accidents involving falling bodies. I don't know what the other 22 is caused by. But he gets up there, he's a preacher. This was a parade of preachers coming up to the podium. They're talking to other preachers. It was probably my favorite debate of all time because it was over the course of 3 nights. It was nothing but Christians, pretty much. And it was nothing but Christian preachers from the Church of Christ, pretty much. See that nothing, pretty much? The hyperbole with the... Sorry. Gravity is responsible for 78% of all accidents involving falling bodies. And I just grabbed my wife's arm and I was like, oh my God, did he just say that? I tweeted it and they got pissed because I'm making fun of them. The thing is, I don't think he's generally stupid. Hell, for all I know, he misspoke. For all I know, he was actually citing some actual statistic about, whether or not you're pushed or fall over. I don't know. But it struck me as funny. Oh, no, you're making fun of us. Okay. Somebody else got up to say, and he's a physicist, although he hasn't done any physics since the early 70s because he became a preacher, got up to say that we can't know that God answers any specific prayer. If we pray and it comes to pass, we cannot know that God actually did that. But we can know that God answers some prayers. Wait a minute, if this is true for each individual instance, I pray, I can't know whether God, even if it comes true, I can't know whether or not God did it that time. I pray, nope, I pray, yes, but maybe, then how is it for the entire series he can say that we're certain that God does it sometimes? It's a horrible mistake there, and he's got it on his slide. There was this parade of preachers getting up there, mocking people with letters after their name. Oh my gosh. I really wish, no I don't. I was going to say I wish that Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss could watch these debates because they were mentioned over and over and over again, but I like them too much to want them to actually have to sit through this. But they kept mocking the idea of people with letters after their names, and one of the preachers got up and said, I don't know much about the science, but I talked to a preacher friend of mine who does, so let me tell you why the science is wrong. I don't mind ignorance. It's fixable with education. I don't even mind willful ignorance so much. I mean, I do, but I mean, it's one of those things that this is your choice. I'm a fan enough of freedom that if you really, truly want to be ignorant, well, bless your heart. But what I can't stand is the celebration of willful ignorance and the encouragement of other people to embrace it as well. It's like Don McLeroy from the Texas State Board of Education saying somebody's got to stand up to the experts. Thanks, dentist. Please enlighten us. When they're up there and they're saying these things, they're exaggerating. And the problem with this is that when the preachers get up there and do it, they're the experts to the people who are out in the pews. So the experts are expressing this incredible confidence in their position that the people in the pews haven't supposedly studied to the same extent as the person standing in front of them. So now these people are extra confident, and they're probably either going to repeat what this guy just exaggerated, or they're going to exaggerate it more. Let's not do that. If I say something up here, if Seth says something, if Arendt says something, anybody, I don't care who it is, if they say something up here and you really find it important and you think that it's probably true, if it's possible to fact check it, do it. Make sure that I didn't just exaggerate or misremember. There's no point in letting it spin out of control. First debate I did against Father Hans Jacobsy at UMBC agreed with me through the whole process. Yes, you can come to correct moral conclusions through purely secular means, because that's what the debate was, secular morality. Actually, almost every debate I've had turned out to be about morality, even if that wasn't the topic. There's only a couple exceptions. And then in the closing, when I couldn't respond, he gets up and he says, secular morality necessarily leads to Nazis and gulags and eugenics. Okay, now, let me check you here real quick. Are you just exaggerating, or, is this is it? So he goes off on his little tirade, and he knows I can't respond to him. Thankfully, during the Q&A right after, the third person to ask a question basically said, hey, what'd you think of his closing? Because then I could reply. Over the course of this, I started a Patreon project that kind of has the discussions about how to have debates. I'm not asking you all to donate, although if you want to, whatever. But the content's available for free to people to talk about how to better have these conversations. How do you lose an argument? Because I get lots and lots of unsolicited advice through the emails, like, for any given call that somebody calls into the show, one person will send an email saying, I just don't understand how you maintained your patience. You almost convinced me there's a God because you are like the saint of patience. And then somebody else will write in, I'm like, oh my God, you're an arrogant dick. How could you talk down to that person that way? And they're talking about the same exact telephone call. And as long as I'm getting both of them, I'm okay. I'm going to keep going. When it begins to lean, almost entirely one way, then I'll have to do some work there. But one of the ways that people suggest you lose an argument is if you are the first one to lose your temper. I completely disagree. Because there are times when losing your cool is justified. There are times when if you're not angry, upset, irritated at what was just said, you're not paying attention. Don't confuse passion with anger. Just because somebody gets angry doesn't mean that you get to dismiss the content of what they're saying. If you get into the style over substance, well, you're no longer interested in having the conversation. This is theater. There's a reason I wear these boots, just for the people who, actually I like them, but for the people who are more interested in theater, let's put some style up there. Because if I came up in gym shorts and flip-flops, all of a sudden people take me less seriously. I did an entire episode of the show in drag specifically to debunk this point. Spoke with my normal voice. I was not trying to be insulting to anybody. I did the show in drag, and the whole point was, what I'm saying is not impacted in any way by who I am, what I like to do, how I like to dress, any of that other stuff. And if you think it does, screw you. You are not willing, you are not yet ready to get into conversations at these levels. Does losing your temper cost you a debate? It can, but merely saying that losing your temper is, you lost his temper first, he loses, well, bite me. I'll debate your dumb ass next. What about the first to use profanity? Fuck no! There's a time and a place for that too, and I'll Google or go to YouTube, Stephen Fry on swearing. It's all you need to hear ever. Somebody already heard it. Those aren't the ways that I find that you are more likely to lose a debate. You know how most debates are lost? The first person to make an exaggerated, unsupported assertion which can be used to demonstrate bias, ignorance, dishonesty, zealousness, and irrationality, and is actually caught doing that by their opponent, because sometimes it just flies right by. That's when you're at risk of losing a debate. They didn't do anything, you did it. You make it easy to mock and parody your position, the more obviously exaggerated and ridiculous your claims are. So let the other side do that. Let them be the ones to work from a script. Let them be the ones to constantly demonstrate that they don't understand the topic. Let the rest of us dig in or say, you know what, I don't know. Or, hey, I don't really have a good answer for that right now. Can I go back and research that? Because most of us are never going to be in a formal debate with times and judges. We're going to be having conversations with our family and friends. So why would we ever try to pretend that we have the answer when it's so much easier to say, that's an interesting question. Let me think about that and get back to you. And then go off and do research. Try and find some people who might know. And if nobody knows, be ready to say, I don't know, and it appears that nobody else does. How can we find out? Because if they're the ones claiming to have the answer to the thing that nobody else seems to know, now they get to tell you how they came by that answer. I'm very hard on bad arguments, especially when they come from people who are ostensibly representing my side of an issue. I'm a lot nicer on the people who have bad arguments that, well, of course, that inflatable Earth theory, not quite there yet on your science, but you get back to me when it's there, and then I will accept it. Here's the big secret. Christians are stupid, and so are Hindus and Scientologists and Muslims and Mormons and Lutherans and Catholics, Jains and Buddhists. So are atheists and agnostics and skeptics and secularists and freethinkers and deists, and so are Republicans and Democrats and Greens and libertarians and socialists and especially communists. We're all stupid about something at some point. This isn't the sum total of our character to be stupid or wrong or moronic or idiotic. It's who we are. When we engage in the exaggerated oversimplifications that are hyperbolic and reactionary, when we're trying to talk to someone that we disagree with, we're demonstrating that. No matter how idiotic their position may be, you might be doing worse by exaggerating your position. Because even though they might have the burden of proof, hey, I believe a God exists. Great, please demonstrate that. When you adopt a burden of proof that you can't meet, not only did you fail to convey your position, you've reinforced theirs in some people's minds. It shouldn't be. I know it's a fallacy, but that's the way it really works. He tried to prove Jesus didn't exist and failed. Therefore, Jesus really, really, really existed. No! So why do it? We've seen it in discussions between believers and non-believers. We've seen it in discussions about social justice issues. We see it all the time, where now that I found out that you're an idiot on this issue, I'm going to summarize your character by that and then write you off as, you are the evil side now. No matter how much stuff we happen to agree on, you're the enemy, because this is the issue I'm focused on now, and we disagree here. No matter how subtly we may disagree, we see it over and over again. And don't get me wrong, Phil Plait did this talk at the Amazing Meeting several years ago about don't be a dick, in which I think he was being a dick by not specifically coming up with any examples or people or nothing. When he got done, I was like, well, what's he talking about? Is he talking about a YouTube comment? Is he talking about, something I posted somewhere? Oh, who knows? That's kind of a dick move. Let everybody just, I think he's talking about so-and-so. I think he's talking about, let me be clear, I'm not talking about anybody in particular in any of this. Ridicule is useful. Ridiculous ideas are, as far as I can tell, deserving of ridicule. There's a difference in how you address ideas versus how you address people. I don't think, I can be an arrogant ass in case you didn't know. There are occasions when people have called into the show where I have actually apologized afterward. I don't know, maybe I'm diabetic, maybe my sugar was a little wonky, maybe I had just heard Pascal's wager for one too many fucking times. Maybe the next time somebody tells me to look at the trees, I'm just gonna, I don't know. Shit happens. I try to make sure that people get as good as they give on the show, that if they're willing to have a conversation, recognize points, move things forward, that call might take 40 minutes. If they're not, no, you're done. Call some Christian show. There's a million of them. There's one of this one. Mockery is useful. People like it when Christians call into the show and say something ridiculous, and they're exposed and embarrassed, and it's like, yay, hooray team, let's keep making them stupid. We're making them look stupid. No. Don't get me wrong, I'm not without ego, and I'm not without the possibility of taking pleasure in someone doing that, but that's not the goal, and it's not the reason I do the show, and it's not the thing that I look back at the show and say, man, I'm really happy that person called and made themselves look stupid. Man, I'm really, really, really happy that Gman, an African American in the United States, called in to say that he'd be okay with slavery. And, well, declaring victory is a whole other issue. I don't know if there's anybody I've ever debated who didn't declare victory. Fine. The rest of us know reality. I didn't take any pleasure in the fact that I'm sad. I'm talking about what the Bible says. He's like, no, I'm making all excuses for it and redefining slavery and twisting things out of it. Just accept it. Your mind's been so poisoned by these religious ideas that you will bend over backwards and exaggerate to defend them. Those aren't my favorite moments from the show. I care more about how we disagree than the fact that we disagree, or perhaps even the topic about which we might disagree. The Reverend Barry Lynn, who's like the head of Americans United for Church-State Separation, I've shared the podium with him many times, and I would again. And I would debate the pants off of him if we were discussing whether or not a God existed. I'd love that. But I'm happier to share a stage with him than some atheists and skeptics that I know who are prone to maybe a little hyperbole, maybe a little irrationality. Let the other side be the ones that are claiming to know things, to know that they know that they know that they know, and never offer a demonstration. Let them be the ones that are looking irrational and reactionary. Let them be the ones that are saying things that are incredibly divisive. Let them shatter their group. I'm not saying don't argue. I'm not saying don't have positions. I'm not saying don't mock, don't ridicule. I'm saying think about what you're doing when you have these conversations. And I'm not talking about with me and a theist, me and anybody. What's your goal? What's your reason for doing this? Is it to show how smart you are, how clever you are, how right you are? Or is it to make the world a better place? Oh, well, you're on the TV show, you call people morons and idiots, you hang up on them. Yes, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm not. Not perfect, like I said. I'm not giving you instructions, telling you what I think. You'd be wise to take them as instructions. But they are not intended explicitly in that way. I don't get to be the ultimate arbiter of what qualifies as anything. Because the ideas are shared and we have these conversations and we have to remember that we're dealing with people. I'm not preaching unity or hive mind. I'm not preaching don't be confrontational. Oh my gosh, I've been saying for years we need firebrands and diplomats, and I think that on some occasions I'm one and on some occasions I'm the other, and I still don't necessarily have it right about when to switch. But I'll keep working on it. We need firebrands and diplomats. We need to have compassion for believers because they're victims. They're victims of being human, of being imperfect human beings who've been presented with an idea that everybody around them seemed to accept, and they accepted it too. How stupid. These ideas that seem to be reinforced, these ideas that ease their discomfort with the unknown and their concerns about dying. It's not surprising to me that religious ideas have existed and thrived. And they need to be destroyed. If they're not true, they need to be destroyed. There's lots of ways to do that. Mere mockery, mere exaggeration, mere you're an idiot is never going to get there. We need good arguments and less hyperbole. Because if that doesn't happen, the divisive parade of horrible, hyperbolic, reactionary arguments and claims that we see will continue to harm every single cause they touch, no matter how right that position may be. And it will continue to divide or expand divisions until, in some sense, it destroys the world. And I'd rather that didn't happen. Because I either like this world or I like what this world can become. And either way, it's the only world I've got so far as I can tell. So let's all stop fucking it up. Thanks. Thanks.